Ethan Ward had lived most of his 25 years drifting from one ranch to another, never finding a true home. Life had been hard since childhood, and he learned early that surviving meant working wherever someone needed strong hands and long hours. The Dalton Ranch was the first place in years that felt steady. The land stretched wider than the eye could see, with golden fields, tall fences, horses running freely, and mountains in the distance that glowed orange during sunset. Ethan often stood outside the bunkhouse just to admire the peace of it all. He liked the silence, the open sky, and the feeling that maybe this place could finally be a real start. But the ranch also had its challenges, and most of them came from one person: Henry Dalton, the owner. Henry was a powerful man, respected by some, and feared by many. He had built the ranch from nothing, and he guarded it as strictly as he guarded his own thoughts. Workers said he had a soft side once, long ago. But no one had seen it for years. Ethan didn't judge him too harshly. Hard lives made hard people. Still, there were days when Ethan wondered why Henry watched him more closely than the other ranch hands. One cold evening, after the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan finished his chores and went to the barn to put away the tools. He was about to head to the bunkhouse when one of the older men stopped him. "The boss wants to see you," he said quietly. "Right now." Ethan frowned. It wasn't normal to be called this late. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward the main house, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. The wind carried a hint of rain, and the sky above was dark and heavy. As he approached the house, he felt a tightness in his chest he couldn't explain. Something about the sudden summons felt wrong. Henry Dalton was waiting inside his office, sitting behind a large wooden desk with papers scattered across it. A lantern burned in the corner, giving the room a dim, warm glow. Henry looked up as Ethan entered, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Sit," he said. Ethan obeyed, wondering if he had done something wrong. Henry studied him for a long moment before speaking. "I've watched you," Henry began. "You work hard. You don't complain. You don't drink or cause trouble like the others. You're steady." Ethan wasn't sure if this was praise or preparation for something worse. He nodded but said nothing. Henry leaned back in his chair. "This ranch needs a man like you. Someone dependable. Someone I can trust with more than chores." Ethan blinked. "Sir, I appreciate that, but I'm not sure what you mean." Henry's jaw tightened. "I'll say it plainly, Ethan. I want you to marry my daughter." For a moment, Ethan thought he misheard. A strange silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling lantern. "Your daughter?" he repeated carefully. "Yes," Henry said firmly. "Marry her, and you'll have a permanent place here. A home. Land to manage. A future." Ethan stared at the desk, unsure how to respond. He had never even seen Henry's daughter. He had heard rumors. Whispers from the ranch hands. They said she was strange, kept hidden, and not pleasant to look at. Some claimed men had run off the ranch just to avoid meeting her. Ethan never paid much attention to gossip, but it was all he knew about her. He swallowed. "Sir, why me?" Henry's eyes narrowed. "Because I need someone loyal. Someone who won't hurt her. Someone who won't walk away." His voice softened for the first time. "She's all I have." Ethan felt a weight settling on his chest. He could understand wanting to protect family, but marrying someone he didn't know? Someone who might not even want this? He shifted uneasily. "I don't mean disrespect," Ethan said slowly. "But shouldn't your daughter choose? This is not up for debate." Henry cut in firmly. "She needs stability. You need a future. It's simple." Then his tone changed again, more serious than before. "If you do not agree, you cannot stay on my land." The room seemed to shrink around Ethan. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. Henry wasn't offering a choice, he was giving an ultimatum. Say yes, or lose everything Ethan had built here. The job, the roof over his head, the chance to start new. The thought of packing up and wandering again, sleeping under harsh skies, and begging for work in towns that didn't want strangers. It sank into him like a cold stone. He looked at Henry, searching for a hint of mercy, a sign that this was only a test. But Henry's face remained still, waiting for his answer. Ethan felt his hands trembling slightly. He imagined a faceless woman behind a veil, someone who might resent him for being forced into marriage. He imagined living with a stranger, trying to build something real out of something that started with pressure. Fear and responsibility tangled inside him. But then he thought of life without the ranch. He thought of the empty roads, the cold nights, the uncertainty he had barely escaped. He thought of the horses he cared for, of the sun rising over the hills each morning, of the tiny but growing feeling of peace he had here. Losing that scared him more than marrying someone he had never seen. His voice came out low. "I agree, sir." Henry nodded once, as if he expected nothing else. "Good. The ceremony will be tomorrow morning. She will come out wearing a veil. Do not speak of this to anyone." Ethan left the office with heavy steps, his mind spinning. The night air felt colder than before. As he walked back to the bunkhouse, the workers' whispers played in his head. "They say she's scary to look at. She hides for a reason. No man wants her." He tried to push those thoughts away. Rumors could be cruel, and people liked to talk more than they liked the truth. Maybe she wasn't what they said. Maybe she was shy, or sick, or simply private. But the fear of the unknown settled in his stomach. He lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, hearing the wind outside. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a woman's face he couldn't imagine. He wondered what she thought of all this. Was she being forced to? Was she lonely? Did she know her father had chosen Ethan for her? Did she even want a marriage? Morning came too fast. The ranch bell rang. Cattle called in the distance, and the sun rose with soft orange light. Ethan got dressed slowly, each movement feeling heavier than the last. When he stepped outside, the world looked almost unreal, like he was walking into someone else's life. The ceremony was set up near the main barn. A few workers gathered quietly, unsure of the details but curious. Ethan stood near the small wooden arch, decorated with plain white cloth. His heart pounded harder with every passing minute. Then he saw her. A woman walked out of the main house wearing a white dress and a long veil that covered her face completely. Her steps were gentle, almost nervous. Henry walked beside her, his expression unreadable. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The moment that would change his life forever. He didn't know if he was ready. He didn't know if she was ready. All he knew was that when he lifted that veil, everything would be different one way or another. The wedding morning felt strangely quiet, as if even the wind held its breath. Ethan stood beneath the small wooden arch, trying to steady himself. His palms were slightly damp, and though he had worked with cattle, storms, and wild horses, nothing had ever made his heart race the way this moment did. He kept telling himself he was doing the right thing. He had agreed, and now he would follow through with respect. Still, the fear of the unknown pressed heavily on his shoulders. The guests were only a handful of ranch workers who had been told to attend. They whispered among themselves, glancing at Ethan with a mix of curiosity and pity. He tried not to listen, but small bits of gossip floated through the air. Poor man. He doesn't even know what she looks like. Why would the boss force this? He must be desperate. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the ground, reminding himself not to judge anything before he saw the truth with his own eyes. Rumors were just words. People loved to talk, even when they didn't know anything. Then a hush spread across the group. Henry Dalton stepped out of the main house with his daughter beside him. She moved slowly, her white dress swaying gently as she walked. A long veil covered her face from forehead to chin, hiding every detail. Her hands, delicate and pale, clutched a small bouquet of simple wildflowers. Ethan felt his heartbeat jump painfully in his chest. He had prepared himself for anything, scars, deformities, something shocking, but now that the moment was real, he felt nervous in a new way. What if she was frightened? What if she didn't want this any more than he did? What if she hated him for agreeing? Henry guided her to the front. Ethan noticed the way her shoulders drooped slightly, as if she carried a weight no one else could see. She didn't look up at the guests. She didn't even lift her head toward Ethan. Her face stayed bowed, hidden behind the veil, and her long hair. The officiant, a quiet preacher from town, began the ceremony. His voice echoed softly across the open yard. "We gather today to join these two people in marriage." Ethan tried to listen, but his thoughts drifted in every direction. He wondered how Clara Henry's daughter felt behind the veil. She stood still, but he could sense tension in her posture. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she was ashamed because of years of cruel rumors. Maybe she feared rejection. He wanted to comfort her somehow, but he barely knew her name, let alone her heart. When it came time for the vows, Clara spoke very softly. Her voice was gentle but shaky, like she wasn't used to speaking in front of people. I do." Ethan felt a strange warmth rise in him. Not because of the marriage, but because her voice didn't match the harsh picture the workers had painted of her. She sounded kind, unsure, and human, nothing like the monster they had created in their stories. Then Ethan repeated his own vow, his voice steady even though his stomach twisted with nerves. "I do." The preacher gave a small nod and closed his book. "You may now lift the veil." Time seemed to slow. Ethan's hand lifted almost on its own. His fingers shook as he reached for the edge of the veil. Henry watched closely, his expression tense and unreadable. The ranch hands leaned in, waiting for the moment that had been the center of gossip for years. Ethan took a quiet breath and gently raised the veil. For a moment, everything inside him stopped. Clara was nothing like the rumors. She wasn't strange, frightening, or unpleasant. She wasn't even plain. Ethan's eyes widened as he stared, unable to hide his surprise. She was beautiful, soft, gentle beauty, not loud or showy. Her skin was smooth, her features delicate, her eyes deep and warm with a shy glow. She looked like someone who had been hiding for too long, someone who had heard far too many lies about herself. But she didn't look ugly, not even close. Her expression, however, was full of fear. She must have thought Ethan's shock meant rejection. She lowered her gaze immediately, her fingers tightening around the bouquet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I know I'm not what people expect." Ethan felt something twist sharply in his chest. He realized she genuinely believed the horrible things people said about her. She thought she was disappointing him. She thought he regretted agreeing. He leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice gentle. No, you're not what people say at all." Clara blinked up at him, confused. Ethan offered a small smile, soft, unsure, but honest. You look fine, truly." He didn't want to embarrass her with big compliments in front of everyone, but he wanted her to know immediately that he wasn't disappointed. A tiny flicker appeared in her eyes, almost like hope. Her shoulders lifted just a little, and she let out a quiet breath she had been holding. The preacher announced them married, and the small crowd clapped weakly, unsure what they had just witnessed. Many ranch hands looked stunned. Some exchanged glances, as if they could not believe their own eyes. The woman they assumed was ugly was nothing like their imagination. Henry seemed relieved, not because of Ethan's reaction, but because the marriage was finally completed. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, guiding her and Ethan toward the house for a private moment. Inside the quiet parlor, Henry cleared his throat. "Clara, this is your husband now. Ethan, she is in your care." His voice was firm but softer than usual. "I expect both of you to respect each other." Clara nodded quickly, still nervous. Ethan gave a small, respectful bow of his head. "I will, sir." Henry stepped out of the room, leaving them alone. The silence between them felt thick but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two strangers trying to understand an unexpected connection. Clara slowly lifted her eyes toward Ethan. "I know this was sudden," she said softly, You didn't have a choice. I'm sorry if this is hard for you. Ethan shook his head gently. It's hard for you too, I think. Clara hesitated, then nodded slightly. People talk about me a lot. I know the things they say. Her voice trembled, not with anger but with deep sadness. Sometimes it's easier to stay inside than to hear those words again. Ethan realized then that her beauty wasn't the real surprise, it was her quiet strength, and the way she carried pain without bitterness. She wasn't weak, she was someone who had learned to endure silence and loneliness for years. I don't trust gossip, Ethan said softly. People repeat stories they don't understand. Clara looked at him carefully, searching his face for judgment. When she found none, her shoulders relaxed a little. Thank you, she whispered. They sat together for a few moments, not knowing what to say next. Everything about their life had changed in a single morning, and both were still trying to make sense of it. Then Henry returned, telling Ethan where they would live on the ranch and what duties would continue. Clara listened quietly, glancing at Ethan every now and then as if trying to read him, trying to see whether he resented her. As they walked out of the house, Ethan noticed the way she kept her hands close to her body, the way she pressed her lips nervously, the way she avoided looking directly at the ranch hands. She had grown used to hiding, and he felt a strange protective feeling settle in his chest. He didn't know her yet, but he wanted her to feel safe. He wanted her to know she wasn't a burden. And standing beside her, he realized this marriage wasn't something he would run away from. It was something he would try to understand step by step, with patience. The sun shone brighter now, warming the yard. Clara walked beside him, still unsure, still shy, but no longer completely hidden behind a veil. And for the first time since agreeing to this marriage, Ethan felt something unexpected. Not fear, not regret, but the beginning of hope. Life changed quietly in the days after the wedding. Ethan and Clara moved into a small cottage on the ranch. A place with 2 rooms, wooden walls, a warm fireplace, and windows that faced the open fields. It wasn't fancy, but it felt peaceful. Clara kept the space tidy, and Ethan noticed she liked arranging small wildflowers in jars to brighten the shelves. She did it silently, almost shyly, as if afraid someone might tell her she wasn't allowed. Ethan continued working long hours, waking before sunrise and returning after sunset. He fed the horses, repaired fences, carried heavy supplies, and checked the cattle. Clara stayed busy too, cooking simple meals and cleaning. But despite living together, there was still a gentle distance between them. They spoke politely, carefully, like 2 people trying not to step on each other's shadows. Ethan wanted to break that distance, but he didn't want to rush her. He could sense Clara was carrying old wounds, maybe not on her face, but in her heart. She had spent too many years believing she was a problem, a disappointment, someone others whispered about. Those things didn't disappear overnight. One afternoon, after finishing chores early, Ethan returned to the cottage and found Clara sitting by the fireplace with a small sketchbook in her hands. He paused in the doorway. Surprised, he had never seen her drawing before. She quickly shut the book, startled. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't hear you come in." Ethan shook his head. "No need to apologize. You don't have to hide what you're doing." Clara hesitated, fingers tapping the cover of the sketchbook. "It's nothing important." "Can I see?" he asked gently. Her cheeks warmed. For a moment, she looked like she might refuse. Then she slowly opened the book and handed it to him. The pages were filled with pencil drawings, horses, trees, the ranch, even the mountains during sunset. They were beautiful, soft, and full of detail. "These are incredible," Ethan said honestly. Clara lowered her eyes. "I've always loved drawing," she whispered. "But Father said people would laugh at my work. He didn't want me going into town with my sketchbooks. He said it would only bring trouble." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. No one would laugh at this. And even if they did, it shouldn't stop you from doing something you enjoy. Clara looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She wasn't used to encouragement. She wasn't used to someone seeing her as capable. Their conversation that day marked a small change between them. Clara began to talk more, little by little. She would ask Ethan how his work went, or tell him about a book she had read. Ethan found himself listening closely, surprised by how thoughtful and gentle she was. She asked questions that showed she cared, and she spoke with a softness that made the cottage feel warmer. But the ranch outside their home wasn't always peaceful. Whispers still floated around, especially at night when workers gathered behind the barns. I still don't understand why he married her. Maybe the boss pressured him. He'll regret it one day. Ethan pretended not to hear, but the words bothered him. Not for himself, but for Clara. He didn't want her to hear such things again. He didn't want the world to hurt her the way it already had. One evening, Ethan returned home and found Clara standing in front of the mirror, touching the small, faint scar near her hairline. She didn't hear him enter. Her expression was sad, almost resigned. "My father says this scar is the reason people talk," she murmured to herself. "He thinks men only notice scars." Ethan stepped forward quietly. "Clara," he said gently. She turned quickly, embarrassed. "I didn't mean for you to hear that." He moved closer, not touching her, just standing near enough that she knew she wasn't alone. "People talk because they enjoy talking. It's not your scar. It's not your face. It's the stories they created." Clara looked down. "Father always kept me hidden. He thought it was better that way." "And what do you think?" Ethan asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "I think hiding hurts more." Ethan felt a painful truth in her words. Clara had been kept away from the world so long that she believed she deserved the isolation. He didn't want her to feel like that anymore. The next morning, Ethan decided to do something different. After finishing his chores, he invited Clara to walk with him across the ranch. She looked surprised, but agreed. The two of them walked along the fence line, the breeze lifting her hair gently. Clara kept glancing at the workers, unsure if she should be seen, but Ethan stayed close beside her. A few ranch hands stared, but not in the cruel way Clara feared. Most were simply shocked to see her outside. Some even gave small nods of respect after all. She was now the ranch owner's daughter-in-law. Ethan noticed Clara relaxing slowly. Her steps became lighter. She even smiled once when a baby calf tried to follow them. "You should come out more," Ethan said softly. "The ranch is part of your home too." Clara thought about this for a moment. "Maybe," she whispered. "It feels nice." For the first time, Ethan saw a spark of confidence in her eyes. A small one, but it was there. Later that week, Clara gathered enough courage to visit the stable while Ethan worked. She stroked the horses gently, speaking to them in a quiet, soothing voice. The animals trusted her instantly. Even the more nervous horses settled under her touch. "You have a gift with them," Ethan said one day. Watching from the doorway, Clara looked startled again, but this time she didn't hide her smile. "They're peaceful. They don't judge." The more time they spent together, the easier things felt. But their peace didn't erase the tension between Ethan and Henry. Henry still watched Ethan closely, questioning his decisions, criticizing small mistakes, and reminding him of responsibilities that had doubled since the marriage. It wasn't intentional cruelty, but it was pressure constant and heavy. One evening, Henry called Ethan to his office again. He didn't ask. He demanded. "You're spending too much time walking around with Clara," Henry said. "She doesn't need distractions. She's my wife," Ethan replied calmly. "And she deserves fresh air." Henry's expression hardened. "Your priority is the ranch. Don't forget that." Ethan bit back frustration. "I'm doing my work, sir. All of it." Henry leaned forward. "Good. Because I won't tolerate anything less." Ethan left the office with clenched fists. He didn't want conflict, but he also didn't want Clara to live like a shadow. She deserved more. The real turning point came a few days later. Clara was preparing lunch when she suddenly stopped and looked out the window. Ethan followed her gaze. Two ranch hands were whispering near the fence. Glancing toward the cottage, Clara's shoulders fell. The memories of past gossip washed over her. Ethan felt anger rise, not loud, but deep and strong. He stepped outside and approached the men, calmly but firmly. "If you have questions, ask me directly. Don't whisper behind her back." The men apologized quickly, surprised by his boldness. They hadn't meant harm, they were simply curious. When Ethan returned inside, Clara looked at him with wide eyes. She wasn't used to someone standing up for her. Not even her father had defended her like that. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly. "Because you shouldn't be hurt by words that aren't true," he replied. Clara's eyes shimmered slightly, though she blinked it away. "No one has ever said that to me before." Ethan felt something shift between them. A connection formed, not forced, not pressured, but slowly, naturally. A quiet understanding. Clara was no longer just Henry's daughter. She was a person with dreams, fears, and a gentle heart. And Ethan realized he wanted to help her grow beyond the shadows she had lived in. Every day, the gap between them shrank. Every day, Clara's steps became lighter, her smile more genuine. And every day, Ethan felt a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, this marriage was not a burden. It was a new beginning for both of them. The quiet understanding between Ethan and Clara continued to grow. But Henry Dalton felt the change as well. He watched them from a distance, noticing how often they walked together, how easily they spoke now, and how Clara seemed to be stepping out of her old shell. For most fathers, this would be a good sign. But Henry was not most fathers. He had lived too long protecting Clara in his own strict way. He wasn't used to sharing responsibility, especially not with another man. One warm afternoon, Ethan returned from the fields to find Henry standing outside the cottage. Clara was inside, unaware of his presence. Henry's face didn't show anger, but it showed something close seriousness mixed with impatience. "We need to talk," Henry said. Ethan wiped his hands on a cloth and nodded. Henry stepped aside, leading him toward the barn. When they reached the shade, Henry crossed his arms. "I see you've been taking Clara around the ranch a lot." And I won. When they reached the side, I won to see. Our see. I won decide. I won to see. I won decide. I won. Ethan answered calmly. "Yes, sir. She likes the fresh air. It makes her happy." "That's not her job," Henry snapped quickly. "She has responsibilities in the house. And your work has doubled. I don't want you getting distracted." Ethan paused. "Sir, I've finished all my work. I do everything that's asked." Henry's eyes narrowed. "Then why do other ranch hands say you're always near her? You married her." "Yes. But don't forget why." Ethan felt a small sting at those words. They were a reminder of how the marriage had begun not with choice, but with pressure. He understood Henry's fear of losing control, but he also saw how much Clara suffered under those same controlling rules. "I remember everything, sir," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady. "But she is my wife, and I want her to live a normal life. She deserves that." Henry's jaw tightened. "Normal? You think taking her out into the open will help her? Do you think the world will suddenly respect her?" "Maybe not," Ethan replied gently. "But keeping her locked away will not help either." Henry stepped closer. "Do not question how I protect my daughter." Ethan met his eyes. "I'm not questioning your intentions, sir. I'm saying Clara is stronger than you believe. She's growing. She's beginning to trust herself. Please, don't take that away from her." Henry remained silent for a long moment. His expression showed conflict, fear mixed with pride, worry mixed with anger. Finally, he turned away abruptly. "Just remember your place," he said coldly. "I won't tolerate any mistakes." When Henry walked away, Ethan felt a heaviness in his chest. He didn't want to anger Clara's father. He wanted peace. But he also knew he couldn't let Clara return to living like a shadow. Later that evening, Ethan sat outside the cottage, thinking about everything. The sky was painted with warm colors of dusk, and the air smelled of fresh hay. Clara noticed him sitting alone, and stepped outside quietly. "Is everything all right?" she asked gently. He looked at her and saw genuine concern in her eyes. It reminded him why he cared so much. "Your father talked to me," Ethan said quietly. Clara's face fell slightly. About me? Ethan nodded. He thinks I'm distracting you. He's worried, but in a way that hurts you without meaning to. Clara sat beside him, folding her hands on her lap. He thinks the world will hurt me, she whispered. So he hides me. I understand his fear. But I'm tired of living quietly because of something that happened long ago. Ethan turned to her. You don't have to live quietly anymore. Not if you don't want to. Clara looked down, thinking. Sometimes I feel guilty when I go outside. Like I am doing something wrong. I was kept indoors so long that walking freely feels strange. Sen, Ethan gently shook his head. You're not doing anything wrong, Clara. You're simply being yourself. A soft smile touched her lips, but soon faded as she spoke again. Father will never accept change easily. I know, Ethan replied, but I'll support you. Not against him, but with you. Clara's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you, Ethan. She returned to the cottage to finish preparing dinner, and Ethan followed. The evening passed quietly, but the air felt lighter between them. They were becoming a real team, two people standing together instead of walking alone. But Henry's worries didn't end. Over the next few days, he watched every move Ethan made. He questioned him about small tasks, criticized him for tiny mistakes, and reminded him repeatedly that the ranch needed discipline. The pressure became heavier. But Ethan refused to let it change how he treated Clara. One night, rain poured hard outside, loud enough to cover most sounds. Clara was preparing tea when she heard raised voices near the porch. She froze. Ethan's voice, firm, calm, but unyielding, rose above the thunder. Sir, please listen. I'm not turning Clara against you. Then Henry's deeper voice. But she has changed ever since you started encouraging her. She questions my rules. She steps outside without asking. You don't see how dangerous that is. Clara's heart pounded. She had never heard her father sound so desperate. She stepped closer to the window to hear better. She isn't a child anymore, Ethan said. She's a grown woman, and she deserves choices. Choices will only hurt her, Henry argued. You don't understand what the world is like. People judge. People talk. I stopped her from going out because I saw how cruel they were, Ethan replied softly, and hiding her taught her to fear herself. Clara covered her mouth with her hand. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that Ethan saw her differently than everyone else ever had. Henry stepped closer, his voice lower. Do you think you know her better than I do? No, Ethan said gently. But I see who she is becoming, and it's beautiful. Clara felt her breath catch. She wasn't beautiful in the way people described beauty. She knew she had a small scar near her hairline. She knew rumors had exaggerated it terribly. But Ethan was looking at something else. Her courage, her kindness, her quiet strength. She needs safety, Henry insisted. She needs freedom, Ethan answered. The rain softened. Henry's steps moved away from the house. Clara heard him mutter something she couldn't understand, then the sound of his boots fading. Ethan walked inside slowly, shaking the rain off his coat. When he saw Clara near the window, he stopped. You heard, he said quietly. Clara nodded. Her eyes shone with emotion. But she didn't cry. Instead, she walked toward him, her hands trembling. Ethan, I didn't know you felt that way, she whispered. He met her gaze gently. I meant every word. You deserve more than fear. She pressed her lips together, trying to keep steady. Thank you. No one has spoken for me like that before. You're not alone anymore, Ethan said softly. We're in this together. Clara lowered her head for a moment, then looked up again, courage shining through. I want to grow. I want to live. And I don't want you to suffer because of me, Ethan shook his head. You're not the reason for any suffering. Your father is afraid to let go. That's all. Clara stepped closer, her voice gentle. I don't want him to lose me, but I also don't want to lose myself. Ethan took a slow breath, moved by her honesty. Then we'll help him understand. Not by fighting, but by showing him you're strong. Clara gave a small nod, a decision forming inside her. Ethan could see it clearly. She was ready to stop hiding, to take small steps forward, even if they scared her. That night, as rain continued to fall softly outside, Clara sat beside Ethan near the fireplace. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm, safe, and full of quiet understanding. Ethan knew challenges were ahead. Henry was not a man who changed easily, but he also knew something else. Clara was ready to stand beside him, and together, they would face whatever came next. The morning after the heavy rain, the ranch felt fresh and quiet. The ground was soft beneath the horses' hooves, and the air smelled of wet grass. Ethan woke early, as he always did, but something felt different inside him. The conversation from the night before still echoed in his mind, the way Henry feared losing Clara, and the way Clara finally spoke of wanting to live freely. Ethan felt more determined than ever to help her grow, even if it meant facing more tension on the ranch. Clara woke a little later. When she came out of the room, her hair slightly messy from sleep, she looked peaceful but thoughtful. She glanced at Ethan, hesitating before speaking. "Do you think Father is angry with me?" she asked quietly. "He's confused," Ethan said gently. "He's scared of change. But anger is not what he feels." "Not really." Clara nodded slowly. She trusted Ethan's words more than her own worries. Over the past weeks, she had learned that he didn't say things just to comfort her. He said things he believed. After breakfast, Ethan prepared to go out for work. Clara stood near the door, watching him with a soft, almost shy expression. "Please be careful," she said. He smiled. "Always." As he walked away, Clara stood at the doorway a little longer than usual. She didn't know what the day would bring, but something inside her whispered that it was time to stop living only in the shadow of fear. Ethan had given her strength, not through force, but through patience and kindness. It was time she used it. Later that morning, she gathered her courage and stepped outside alone. She carried her sketchbook in one hand, her fingers trembling, though the day was warm. She walked past the cottage, past the stable, and toward the open fields. A few ranch hands saw her and were surprised, but no one laughed or whispered the way she feared. In fact, most simply nodded politely, as if she were finally a normal part of the ranch. Clara chose a quiet place under a tall oak tree. She settled on the grass, opened her sketchbook, and began to draw. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, touching her face with soft, warm light. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged outdoors. What she didn't know was that Henry stood far away near the barn, watching her. His face was unreadable. Part confusion, part fear, part awe. He wasn't used to seeing his daughter alone in open space, looking calm and happy. It stirred something deep inside him, something he had buried beneath layers of worry. As the day passed, Clara continued drawing. Sometimes she paused to look at the fields or at the horses grazing. She felt peaceful, even proud that she could do something so simple and yet so brave. When Ethan finished his chores, he walked toward the oak tree and found Clara sitting there with her sketchbook open. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her smile came quickly, without hesitation. "You came," she said softly. "I always will," Ethan replied. "How was your morning?" Clara looked down at her drawing. Ethan noticed it was a picture of the ranch under morning light. "It felt free," she whispered. "I didn't hide. I didn't wait for anyone to tell me it was all right. I just came out here." Ethan sat beside her. "I'm proud of you." She looked at him, touched by his words. "I didn't know I could feel like this." "You can feel even more," Ethan said gently. "Just keep taking small steps." Before Clara could respond, they saw Henry approaching. His steps were slow, uncertain. Clara tensed a little, but she didn't close her sketchbook or stand up. Ethan stayed beside her, calm and steady. Henry stopped in front of them, staring at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind rustled the leaves above them, You came out here alone, Henry finally said. His voice wasn't angry. It was soft, almost fragile. Clara took a small breath. Yes, Father. I wanted to. Henry looked down at her sketchbook. He reached out hesitantly, then stopped, unsure if he should touch it. May I see? He asked. Clara nodded, her heart beating fast. Henry lifted the book and studied the drawing. His eyes softened. I didn't know you still drew. I never stopped, Clara said quietly. I only stopped showing you. Henry closed the book slowly. He looked at her again, and this time his voice held emotion he rarely showed. Clara, I was trying to protect you. I thought keeping you hidden would keep you safe. Clara lowered her eyes. But it made me feel alone. Henry swallowed hard, his body stiff with regret. I know. And I'm sorry. The words came out rough, but honest. I didn't know how to do things differently. Ethan watched silently, giving them space. He didn't interfere. This was something Clara needed, something they both needed. Henry turned to Ethan next. I thought you were making her forget her place. I accused you of changing her too fast. But now, I see she is changing because she wants to. Ethan nodded respectfully. She's stronger than most people see. Henry's gaze went back to his daughter. I see it now. Clara blinked, surprised by her father's gentle tone. She had always believed he cared, but hearing him admit it openly felt like a rare gift. Henry let out a slow breath. If going outside, drawing, and taking small steps makes you happy, then I won't stand in your way anymore. Clara felt her chest tighten not from fear, but from relief. Thank you, Father. Henry placed the sketchbook gently beside her. Just be careful. The world can be harsh. Ah, I will, Clara said softly. But I'm not alone anymore. She looked at Ethan, and Henry noticed the quiet bond between them. It wasn't forced. It wasn't built from fear. It was built from understanding. Henry nodded slowly, accepting it. As he walked away, Clara leaned back against the tree, letting out a long, shaky breath. Ethan smiled at her gently. You handled that well, he said. Clara brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. I was scared, but I knew I had to speak. Courage doesn't mean not being scared, Ethan replied. It means speaking even when you are. Clara looked down at her hands, then at the ranch stretching far into the distance. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged here, not as someone kept hidden, not as someone pitied, but as herself. Ethan reached out and held her hand lightly. She didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed the warmth of his presence to calm her. They sat like that for a long while, watching the horizon turn golden as the sun began to set. That evening, when they returned to the cottage, Clara felt lighter, almost glowing from inside. She hung her sketchbook on a shelf where it was visible instead of hiding it. Ethan noticed and smiled quietly. Later, as they sat by the fireplace, Clara spoke softly. I never thought my life could feel like this. I never imagined a day where Father apologized, or where I could walk freely, or where I felt safe with someone. Ethan turned to her. You deserve a peaceful life, Clara, and I'll try every day to make sure you have one. Her eyes softened. And I will try every day to be brave. The fire crackled gently between them. Outside, the stars brightened the night sky. Inside, the cottage felt warmer than ever, filled not just with light, but with hope. Clara wasn't the hidden daughter anymore. She wasn't the girl defined by rumors or fear. She was someone discovering her own strength, her own joy, her own future. And Ethan wasn't just a cowboy forced into marriage. He had become the man who helped her step into the world, who protected her dignity, who spoke softly but stood firmly at her side. Together, they weren't two strangers pushed into a life they didn't choose. They were partners, equals, learning to build something beautiful from the quiet beginning fate had given them. And slowly, step by step, they were becoming a real family, not by force, not by fear, but by choice.